You know, one of the striking things about the Republican response to the tragedy in Orlando is how little they have been willing to address the fact that this was a crime against LGBT people. That somehow those four letters, 5 LGBTQ, if you prefer, seem to get left out of the entire Republican equation. They want us to be fixated on the religious identity of the shooter and not on the victims. But in fact, as our next guest is going to make clear to us, it is extremely dangerous, according to the data, to be gay or transgender in the United States. Tim Marcin is a reporter with the International Business Times. He has been covering this story, and he joins us now. Tim, thanks for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me on.
So you wrote a piece called about LGBT hate crimes. And first, let's start with this. Tim, is your observation more or less the same as mine, that there are a number of people talking about this shooting without focusing on the centrality of sexual orientation in this episode?
Well, I think it might be something that's underlooked. And I think the prevalence of hate crimes against LGBT people overall is something that we might overlook.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the statistics, if you have them in front of you or if you know them by heart. How do crimes against LGBT people fit into the whole hate crime? We have a hate crime problem in this country, and how do those types of crimes fit into that?
Sure. So I do have the latest data here, and according to the latest FBI data, which tracks it nationwide, about 18.6% of all hate crimes were motivated by sexual orientation, and that's the latest data, which was from 2014. That was actually slightly down from the overall percentage of hate crimes, but it was only down from about 20%. But that's a pretty stark percentage of the total amount of hate crimes. If you look at some of the other data out there, I mean, it's disproportionate how many hate crimes are directed towards LGBT people when you consider the size of the LGBT population. It's about 8.3 times the rate that you would expect, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. So it's prevalent, and it's not something that maybe is brought up enough.
Have you interviewed anybody who, have you interviewed folks at all about their personal experiences in this, either victims of crimes or people who, just by virtue of their own identity, feel fearful? We talked to a couple folks yesterday about that on the show, but do you have any thoughts about that? Are people living in fear because of this?
Well, for this story, the latest story I did was very data-based, but I have done stories in the past on kind of LGBT issues, and especially around the time when same-sex marriage was legalized nationwide. I spoke with a lot of activists, and of course, same-sex marriage being legalized nationwide was a huge win for them. But they almost, across the board said, this is only the beginning. This is a huge win, but there are a lot of issues we need to address still. And just because we have same-sex marriage, it doesn't mean there's nationwide acceptance. It doesn't mean that there aren't fears. And I think, that's important to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's your feeling about, in terms of the Orlando incident itself, is there anything you've come across that you feel is underreported or neglected in that story that people should be a little bit more aware of?
Sure. If we're talking the LGBT community, I think people should know that, first of all, on a nationwide basis, the latest data shows that hate-motivated homicides against the LGBT community were up 11%. I think people should know that transgender people are increasingly the target of hate crimes. That's up 13%, according to the latest data. And I think people should know that it's particularly dangerous to be an LGBT person in Florida. The latest data there from the Attorney General shows that 20%, more than 20% of hate crimes are directed to people because of their sexual orientation. That's higher than the nationwide average. And in Orlando's Orange County, if you drill down even further, half of all reported hate crimes targeted people for sexual orientation in the latest data.
Wow,
So
that's a huge. So you're talking about, for the country as a whole, 18 to 20%, depending on which year you look at, slightly higher in Florida. But in Orange County, in that part of Florida, you're saying it's more than double that. It's 2.5 times as much. It's half of all hate crimes. Any idea why that might be? Is it cultural? Is it a collision of cultures? Is it any theories as to why it's so high in Orange County?
It's hard for me to know. I don't live in Orlando, so I can't be 100% sure on that. I mean, if you want to be, you could always say maybe it's just a statistical anomaly. It's a smaller sample size, but I think that's something that should at least be considered. I can't really say why that would be the case, but it's something that I think should at least be looked into. Absolutely.
And last question for you, Tim Marcin of the International Business Times. Roughly, when we say that 18 to 20% of total hate crime numbers, do you know the total volume of hate crimes that we're talking about here, either nationally or for that 20%? I mean, we can divide by 5, but do you know roughly how many hate crimes occurred during the last year we have statistics for?
Sure. I think I'm going off the top of my head here because I didn't have it exactly in the story, but I think it was about 5,400 or so. And the thing that you should be aware of when you're saying that, and this is from the FBI's numbers, is that that's almost assuredly undercounted, because
right.
The FBI relies on local agencies, and some are way better than others at really digging at and finding out that these were hate crimes.
Right, and I guess the point I would want to make in that, Tim, is that at a minimum we're really talking about roughly 1,000 hate crimes, and that's quite a few. And that is a situation we should all be deeply, deeply concerned about. So Tim Marcin of International Business Times, thanks for your reporting on this issue, and thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.